Imagine giving up everything, your dreams, your career, your freedom, to build a life with a man you love, only to be betrayed when he finally reaches the top. Amara stood by Samuel when he had nothing, sacrificed for him, believed in him, until the day he replaced her with another woman. But karma never sleeps. What happens when the betrayer becomes the broken one? And will Amara ever look back? Stay tuned, because you won't believe what happens next. Before we begin, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another powerful story. Let's get into it. The warm afternoon sun streamed through the small living room window, casting a golden hue over the modest but cozy apartment. Amara sat on the floor, her legs folded beneath her as she balanced a baby bottle in one hand and a pen in the other. Her husband, Samuel, sat across from her at a wooden table, eyes scanning the business proposal he had rewritten for the 10th time. "We're going to make it, Amara," he said, looking up from the papers, his voice filled with both exhaustion and determination. Amara smiled, shifting their 6-month-old baby onto her lap. "Of course we will. I believe in you." Samuel's dream was to build a logistics company, a business that would one day change their lives. But the journey was anything but easy. Money was tight, investors were hard to find, and failure loomed over them like a dark cloud. But Amara never wavered. She had given up a promising career as a teacher to support Samuel's ambitions, knowing that his success was their success. She managed their household, raised their son, and stretched every penny to keep their dream alive. Some nights they barely had enough to eat. Other times Samuel came home drained, his shoulders sagging under the weight of rejection. But through it all, Amara remained his anchor, her unwavering faith keeping him from drowning in despair. Then, after years of struggle, the breakthrough came. Samuel secured a major contract with a shipping company, and suddenly their lives changed. Money flowed in, their small apartment was replaced by a beautiful home, and Samuel's name became respected in the business world. Amara watched with pride as her husband transformed into a successful man. The sacrifices had been worth it, or so she thought, because as the wealth grew, so did the distance between them. Samuel no longer had time for long evening conversations. He stopped asking about her day. His phone became his closest companion, and late-night meetings became a regular excuse. At first, Amara convinced herself it was stress. Success came with responsibilities, and Samuel had worked too hard to lose it all. But deep inside, a small voice whispered that something was changing, and she wasn't sure she was ready for what was coming. The sound of clinking silverware filled the spacious dining room as Amara set the table for dinner. The aroma of spicy jollof rice and grilled chicken filled the air, a meal she had carefully prepared, just the way Samuel liked it. She glanced at the clock. 8:45 p.m. He was late again. 4 months now, Samuel had been coming home at odd hours, always with an excuse. A business meeting ran late. Traffic was terrible. I had to meet a client. Amara wanted to believe him, but her gut told her something was wrong. She dialed his number. Ring, ring, ring. No answer. Sighing, she walked to the dining table, where their 5-year-old son Jason sat with sleepy eyes. "Mommy, is Daddy coming home?" he asked, rubbing his eyes. Amara forced a smile. "Of course, sweetheart. He's just busy." Busy. That word had become Samuel's excuse for everything lately. Jason pushed his plate away. "I want to eat with Daddy." Amara's heart clenched. He missed his father. She missed her husband. An hour later, just as she was putting Jason to bed, the front door creaked open. Amara turned to see Samuel stepping in, dressed in a crisp suit, smelling of expensive cologne. "You're late," she said, keeping her voice calm. He sighed, loosening his tie. "I told you I had a meeting." Amara crossed her arms. "I called you. You didn't pick up." Samuel ran a hand through his short hair. "Amara, can we not do this tonight? I'm tired." She stared at him, searching his face for any sign of warmth, any trace of the man she had once known. "Are you sure it's just work, Samuel?" His eyes flickered just for a second. Then he scoffed. "What are you trying to say? That I'm lying?" Amara hesitated. She wanted to trust him. But her heart whispered otherwise. I feel like we're drifting apart," she admitted softly. "We hardly talk anymore. You're always too busy." Samuel shook his head and grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge. "Amara, you're overthinking things. Everything is fine." But everything was not fine. As Samuel turned away, his phone vibrated on the counter. Amara's eyes flicked to the screen. "Zara, work." Her stomach twisted. Samuel grabbed his phone quickly, his movements stiff. "I need to take this," he muttered, walking out of the kitchen. Amara stood frozen, a sinking feeling settling deep in her chest. She knew that name, Zara. And something told her that this was only the beginning. Amara couldn't sleep that night. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing with questions she didn't want to answer. Who was Zara? Why was Samuel hiding her? The next morning, she decided to push the thoughts away. Maybe she was overreacting. Maybe Zara was just a work colleague, nothing more. She wanted to believe that. She needed to believe that. But doubt had a way of creeping in, even when she tried to silence it. 2 weeks passed, and Samuel's behavior grew even more suspicious. He became more secretive, his phone never leaving his side. Late nights turned into overnight business trips, and the distance between them widened like an unspoken truth neither of them wanted to address. Then one evening, Amara's best friend, Nora, came over for a visit. As they sat in the living room sipping tea, Nora hesitated before speaking. "Amara, there's something I need to tell you," she said carefully. Amara frowned. "What is it?" Nora looked uneasy. "I saw Samuel yesterday." Amara's heart skipped a beat. "Okay. Where?" Nora took a deep breath. "At a restaurant." He wasn't alone. A cold shiver ran down Amara's spine. Who was he with? Nora hesitated, then pulled out her phone. "I didn't want to believe it, so I took this picture." She handed the phone to Amara. Amara's hands trembled as she looked at the screen. There in crystal clear detail was Samuel, smiling, laughing, his hand resting on the hand of a young, beautiful woman. Zara. The world around Amara seemed to blur. Her breath caught in her throat, her chest tightening with a pain she hadn't expected. "Are you okay?" Nora asked gently. Amara swallowed hard. She wanted to scream, to cry, to demand answers. But instead she nodded slowly. "I need to talk to him." That night, when Samuel finally came home, Amara was waiting. She placed the phone on the table, the picture staring up at him. "Who is she?" Amara's voice was steady, but her heart was pounding. Samuel glanced at the picture and scoffed. "Are you seriously spying on me now?" "I didn't take the picture, Samuel. Nora did. Now tell me the truth. Who is she?" He exhaled sharply, rubbing his temples. "Amara, you're being paranoid. She's a colleague. That's all." Amara's eyes burned. "Colleagues don't hold hands over dinner, Samuel." His expression hardened. "Why are you making this a big deal? Maybe if you weren't always at home doing nothing, you wouldn't feel so insecure." The words cut deeper than she expected. Doing nothing. She had given up everything to support him, to build the life they had. And now he saw her as nothing. She stood slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I gave up my dreams for you. I stood by you when you had nothing. And now that you have everything, I'm nothing." Samuel ran a frustrated hand down his face. "Amara, I don't have time for this." And just like that, he turned away, walking up the stairs, leaving her standing there, shattered. She had her answer. Samuel was cheating. And he didn't even care enough to deny it. Amara sat in silence long after Samuel had gone upstairs, staring blankly at the picture on Nora's phone. It was real. He was cheating. No more doubts. No more second-guessing. The man she had loved, sacrificed for, and built a life with had betrayed her without remorse. A wave of emotions crashed over her. Anger, heartbreak, humiliation. How long had she ignored the signs? How long had she convinced herself that things would get better? The next morning, she woke up with a decision. She couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. Samuel was already dressed for work when she walked into the kitchen. He was scrolling through his phone, sipping his coffee as if nothing had happened. "We need to talk," Amara said, her voice firm. He sighed dramatically, setting his cup down. "Not this again, Amara." Her hands clenched into fists. "Yes, this again. I need the truth, Samuel. Are you in love with her?" He looked up, and for a brief second something flashed in his eyes. Guilt? Regret? But it was gone just as quickly. "That's ridiculous," he scoffed. "You're imagining things." She stepped closer. "Then prove me wrong. Stop coming home late. Stop lying. Show me that I still matter." Samuel exhaled sharply and ran a hand over his face. "Amara, I don't have time for this drama. I have meetings to attend." He grabbed his briefcase and walked toward the door. She felt something inside her snap. "If you walk out that door, Samuel, you're choosing her." He paused, his back still turned. For a moment she thought he would stop, that he would finally admit the truth. Instead he scoffed. "Then I guess I've already made my choice." And with that he walked out. The days that followed were some of the hardest of Amara's life. Samuel no longer hid his affair. He stayed out later, took weekend trips, and avoided conversations with her altogether. Amara felt like a ghost in her own home. But one evening everything changed. She was folding laundry in the bedroom when Jason ran in. His little face beaming with excitement. "Mommy, guess what? Daddy's new friend came to school today." Amara froze. "What?" Jason nodded eagerly. "Her name is Zara. She picked Daddy up in a big car. My teacher said she's very pretty." Amara felt her stomach drop. He was getting bold, bringing her around their child. Tears burned in her eyes, but she forced a smile. "That's nice, sweetheart. Go wash your hands for dinner." Jason skipped away, humming to himself. Amara sat on the bed, gripping a pillow tightly. This was it. He wasn't just betraying their marriage. He was introducing his mistress into their son's life. A fire lit inside her. She had spent too long crying, too long waiting for Samuel to wake up and realize what he was throwing away. No more. She needed to take control of her life again. She needed to stop waiting for Samuel to choose her. It was time to choose herself. Amara didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying Jason's innocent words over and over. Zara had picked Samuel up from school. Their child had seen her. Something inside her broke completely. By morning her decision was made. She wouldn't beg Samuel. She wouldn't cry anymore. She would rebuild herself. That afternoon, Amara visited an old friend, Mrs. Benson, the principal of the school where she once taught before sacrificing her career for Samuel's dreams. The warm smile on Mrs. Benson's face immediately made her feel at ease. "Amara, it's been too long. How are you, my dear?" Amara took a deep breath. I need to come back. I want to teach again." Mrs. Benson studied her carefully before nodding. "I always knew you'd return. You were one of the best teachers we had." A lump formed in Amara's throat. She had forgotten what it felt like to be valued. "There's a position available," Mrs. Benson continued. "It won't be easy stepping back in after so many years, but I know you can do it." Amara smiled for the first time in weeks. "I'm ready." And she meant it. When she got home that evening, she found Samuel in the living room, casually scrolling through his phone. "I went back to my old school today," she said, setting down her bag. He barely looked up. "For what?" "I'm returning to teaching." That got his attention. His brow furrowed as he finally looked at her. "Why?" Amara folded her arms. "Because I'm done sitting around waiting for you to respect me." Samuel scoffed, shaking his head. "Amara, don't be dramatic." Her jaw clenched. Dramatic. You paraded your mistress in front of our son, Samuel. I let go of my dreams to support yours, and you threw me aside like I was nothing. He rolled his eyes. So now you're playing the victim. Amara took a step closer, her voice calm but firm. No, I'm taking back my life. You don't get to define me anymore. For a moment, Samuel just stared at her, as if seeing her for the first time. But instead of responding, he simply shook his head and muttered, "Do whatever you want." And for the first time, Amara didn't need his approval. She would do whatever she wanted. She would rebuild herself. And she would no longer let Samuel's betrayal define her. Amara woke up the next morning feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time: determination. For years she had centered her life around Samuel. His dreams, his success, his happiness. Now it was time to focus on herself. She dressed in a simple but elegant outfit, packed her bag, and left for her first day back at school. As she walked into the familiar hallways, a sense of nostalgia hit her. The scent of chalk, the sound of children laughing. It was like stepping into a world she had once loved but had long abandoned. Mrs. Benson greeted her warmly. "Welcome back, Amara. Your class is waiting." Amara took a deep breath. She was ready. The classroom was filled with eager young faces, all watching her expectantly. "Good morning, class. My name is Mrs. Amara, and I'll be your new teacher." A little girl in the front row raised her hand. "Are you nice?" Amara smiled. "I like to think so. But you'll have to be nice to me too." The class giggled, and just like that, the tension in her chest melted away. She had found her place again. That evening, when Amara returned home, she found Samuel sitting in the living room. His laptop open, a frown on his face. "Something wrong?" she asked, though she wasn't sure why she even cared anymore. Samuel exhaled sharply. "Business isn't going as planned." Amara nodded, uninterested. He had made his bed. Let him lie in it. "I heard you started teaching again," he said after a moment. She sat down and removed her shoes. "I did." He looked at her, studying her face. "You actually seem happy." For the first time, she didn't need validation from him. "I am." Something in his expression shifted, but Amara didn't dwell on it. His opinion no longer mattered. She had started her new beginning, and there was no turning back. Samuel had always been a man of confidence, a man who believed he could never lose. But lately things were falling apart. The business deals that once flowed effortlessly were now slipping through his fingers. Clients who once respected him were suddenly hesitant. His employees whispered behind his back, and tension filled the office. First he brushed it off. A rough patch, nothing more. But when one of his biggest investors pulled out of a major contract, Samuel felt the first real crack in his empire. "You're losing focus, Samuel," Mr. Okafor, the investor, had told him. "Your reputation isn't the same. I hear things about a mistress, about a broken home. People don't trust you like they used to." Samuel had scoffed, but deep down the words stung. His perfect world was crumbling. Meanwhile, Amara was flourishing. Each day, she poured herself into her work, and her students adored her. Parents began to take notice, praising her patience and dedication. One afternoon, Mrs. Benson called her into the office. "Amara, I have good news. We want to offer you a promotion. Head of the literature department." Amara's eyes widened. "Me? But I just returned." Mrs. Benson smiled. "Yes, but your passion is undeniable. We need someone like you." For a moment, Amara hesitated. Could she really be this woman again? A leader. A woman with her own achievements. Then she smiled. "I'd love to accept." Her new life was taking shape, and for the first time in years, she was stepping into her own power. At home, things between her and Samuel had shifted. He watched her differently now. Noticed the glow in her skin, the confidence in her step. She no longer asked for his attention. She no longer cared for his validation. One evening, as she sat grading papers, Samuel spoke up. You seem different. Amara barely looked up. I am. Silence filled the space between them. For the first time, Samuel felt something unsettling creep into his chest. Regret. But it was only the beginning of his downfall. Samuel had always believed that Zara was different. She was young, exciting, and full of energy. She made him feel like the powerful man he had always imagined himself to be. But lately things had changed. Zara had become distant, less affectionate, less eager to impress him. She was always on her phone, always busy. One evening, as they sat in an expensive restaurant, Samuel noticed something. She wasn't paying attention to him. She was scrolling through her phone, smirking at a message. He cleared his throat. Everything okay? Zara glanced up, clearly irritated. Yeah. Just talking to a friend. Samuel frowned. Who? Zara rolled her eyes. Relax, Samuel. Why are you acting like a jealous husband? Jealous husband. The words hit him like a slap. That was what Amara used to call him. Back when he actually cared. The meal ended awkwardly, and as they left, Samuel had the strangest feeling in his gut. Something was wrong. That night he drove Zara home, but instead of leaving immediately, he waited. He watched as she entered her apartment. And then, just a few minutes later, another car pulled up. A man stepped out. Young, rich-looking, confident. Zara opened the door with a wide smile and threw her arms around him. Samuel gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles turning white. His breath came fast and heavy. He had been a fool. All this time, while he had been throwing away his marriage, his family, his business, Zara had been playing him. She was never in love with him. She was in love with his money. And now that his business was struggling, she had found someone better. Meanwhile, Amara sat in her bedroom, helping their daughter with homework. She was laughing, at peace, her heart light. She had moved on. Samuel, on the other hand, sat in his car outside Zara's apartment, his world collapsing around him. The mistress he had destroyed his home for had betrayed him, and karma had only just begun. Samuel barely slept that night. Images of Zara in another man's arms haunted him. The betrayal, the humiliation, it was unbearable. But deep down he knew he deserved it. For months, he had ignored Amara, humiliated her, blamed her for his own guilt. He had thought Zara was his reward, but in the end she had only been a mirror, reflecting his own selfishness back at him. Now he had lost everything. And it was only getting worse. At work, the bad news kept piling up. One of his most trusted employees resigned, taking several clients with him. Suppliers refused to extend credit, and the bank had stopped returning his calls. He was running out of money fast. During a meeting, his business partner, Mr. Adewale, sighed heavily and leaned forward. Samuel, be honest with me, he said. What's going on? The company is in free fall, and you're acting like you don't see it. Samuel rubbed his temples. It's just a rough patch. Things will turn around. Mr. Adewale shook his head. No, they won't. People don't trust you anymore. Investors are pulling out. Your reputation is tainted. He hesitated before adding, This isn't just about business, Samuel. People talk. They know about your wife. About Zara. Samuel clenched his jaw. So this was it. His personal choices had finally poisoned his professional life. I built this company, he said through gritted teeth. Mr. Adewale sighed. And now you're destroying it. With that, he stood up and walked out. Samuel sat alone in the empty conference room, staring at the table. For the first time in his life, he felt powerless. Meanwhile, Amara was soaring. Her promotion had made her a leader in the school, and her passion for teaching had rekindled a joy she had forgotten. She was no longer just Samuel's wife. She was Amara, the woman who had rebuilt her life from the ground up. One afternoon, she received an invitation to speak at a women's empowerment seminar. They wanted her to share her journey, how she had walked away from a broken marriage and found her strength again. As she read the email, she smiled. She had found her purpose. And Samuel. Samuel was losing his grip on everything he had once thought was untouchable. The mighty was falling. Samuel's life was spiraling out of control. His company was sinking. His so-called friends had abandoned him. And now Zara was avoiding his calls. He had tried to confront her after catching her with another man, but she had only laughed. "Oh, Samuel," she had said, flipping her long hair. "You really thought I was going to be with a broke man?" Her words stung. Now, as he sat in his empty office, staring at unpaid bills and unread emails, he felt a crushing weight on his chest. He had lost everything. But the worst was yet to come. One evening, desperate to escape his thoughts, he drove to his favorite club, the place he and Zara used to go. As soon as he walked in, the music felt louder than usual, the lights harsher. He spotted Zara at the VIP section, draped over the man he had seen at her apartment. She looked happy, happier than she had ever looked with him. Rage boiled in his veins, but as he stepped forward, a sudden wave of realization hit him. This was exactly what he had done to Amara. He had flaunted Zara right in front of his wife, not caring about her pain. He had humiliated her, made her feel small. And now the universe was showing him what it felt like. He turned and walked out. For the first time he felt ashamed. Meanwhile, Amara was thriving. The Women's Empowerment Seminar had been a turning point for her. After her speech, several women approached her, some in tears, thanking her for sharing her story. "You've given me hope," one woman said, squeezing her hand. That night, Amara lay in bed, feeling something new. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't regret. It was peace. She no longer cared about Samuel, Zara, or the past. Her future was bright, and she was finally free. Samuel, on the other hand, drove home in silence, feeling the crushing loneliness he had created for himself. The mistress he had sacrificed everything for had betrayed him. His business was failing. His family had moved on. And for the first time he realized he had no one to blame but himself. Samuel sat in his dark, empty house, staring at the ceiling. The silence was suffocating. Once, this house had been full of laughter. His children's voices echoing through the halls, Amara's soft humming as she prepared dinner. Now it was nothing but a cold, empty space. He had traded a home for an illusion. His phone buzzed. For a second his heart leaped, hoping it was Zara. It wasn't. It was a message from his lawyer. "We need to discuss your financial situation. Urgent." Samuel closed his eyes. The reality was sinking in fast. He was running out of money. Meanwhile, Amara was preparing for another big event at her school. She had been invited to be a guest speaker at an educational conference, a recognition of her hard work. Dressed in an elegant blue gown, she checked herself in the mirror. She looked radiant, strong, unbreakable. As she left for the event, she received a call from an unknown number. "Samuel." She let the phone ring. She had nothing left to say to him. But Samuel wasn't ready to be ignored. The next morning he showed up at the school. The sight of him standing by the gate, looking haggard and broken, made Amara pause for a moment. This was not the same confident, arrogant man who had once dismissed her as a mere housewife. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his face unshaven. He looked like a man who had lost everything. Amara walked past him without a word, but he followed. "Amara, please," he begged. "Just a minute." She turned, her eyes calm but unreadable. "What do you want, Samuel?" He swallowed hard. I made a mistake." His voice cracked. "I lost the business, Zara is gone and I—" He exhaled, as if the weight of his own words was crushing him. "I need you." Amara stared at him, feeling nothing. Not anger. Not sadness. Just indifference. "That's the problem, Samuel," she said quietly. "You only need me now that you have nothing." Tears welled in his eyes. "I regret everything," he whispered. "I was a fool." She nodded. "Yes, you were." Then she walked away. And for the first time, Samuel truly understood. Some mistakes can't be undone. Samuel stood frozen, watching Amara walk away. The woman who once loved him unconditionally, who sacrificed everything for him, no longer cared. He wanted to chase after her, to beg, to plead, but deep down he knew. It was too late. He had broken something that could never be fixed. Amara entered her office, taking a deep breath. Seeing Samuel in that state should have made her feel something. Pity, satisfaction, anger. But she felt none of it. She had outgrown him. She wasn't the same woman who cried herself to sleep over his betrayal. She had healed. Her phone buzzed with a message from Nora. "I heard Samuel showed up at your school. You okay?" Amara smiled, touched by her friend's concern. "I'm fine. He's just facing his karma." And that was the truth. That evening, Samuel sat in a small roadside restaurant, eating a cheap meal of rice and beans. This was his reality now. The luxury restaurants, the expensive wine, the five-star hotels, all gone. He scrolled through his phone, desperately searching for job opportunities. But no one wanted to work with a man whose reputation had been destroyed. Suddenly, a voice interrupted his thoughts. "Samuel!" He looked up. It was Nora. She was dressed elegantly, looking as radiant as ever. But her expression was one of shock. He forced a smile. "Nora. Long time." She sat down across from him, studying him carefully. "I heard about everything," she said. "The business, Zara. Amara told me you came looking for her." Samuel sighed, rubbing his face. "I made mistakes, Nora. I lost everything." She nodded. "Yes, you did." For a moment there was silence. Then she leaned forward, her eyes serious. "Do you regret what you did to Amara?" His throat tightened. "Every single day." Nora exhaled, as if she had been waiting for him to admit it. "She loved you, Samuel. She would have done anything for you. But you threw her away like she was nothing." "I know." His voice broke. "I wish I could take it back." Nora shook her head. "Life doesn't work that way. Some wounds don't heal." Samuel looked down, feeling the weight of his choices. He had spent years chasing the wrong things, and now he was paying the price. And for the first time he fully accepted it. There would be no second chances. Amara sat in her cozy living room, sipping tea as her children laughed in the background. Her home felt warm, full of love, everything Samuel had thrown away. She was no longer the broken woman begging for her husband's love. She was stronger, wiser, and at peace. Her career had flourished, and she had even started a foundation for women recovering from betrayal and heartbreak. Her life was moving forward. Meanwhile, Samuel's downward spiral continued. He had tried to apply for jobs, but no one wanted to hire a man with a tainted reputation. His debts piled up. His once loyal friends had abandoned him. Even his family, who once praised his success, had distanced themselves. One night, he found himself sleeping in his car, parked outside an old warehouse. It was a cold, miserable night. He thought about calling Amara again. Maybe she would help him. Maybe she still cared. But deep down he knew the truth: she had moved on. And he was the only one trapped in the past. The next day, Amara was invited to speak at a women's empowerment event. As she stepped onto the stage, the applause was thunderous. She looked out at the audience, women who had gone through pain, betrayal, and heartbreak, just like her. She took a deep breath and began. "I once believed that love was about sacrifice, about enduring pain for the sake of marriage. But I learned that true love should never require a woman to lose herself." The room was silent, hanging on to her every word. "I was betrayed. I was abandoned. But I chose to rise, to rebuild my life, and to never let anyone define my worth." The crowd erupted in applause. At that moment she felt something deep inside her. Not just healing but power. She had transformed her pain into purpose. And she would never look back. Samuel sat on a wooden bench in a crowded park, watching people pass by. Some were laughing, holding hands. Others were on their way to work, their lives moving forward. Unlike his. He had lost everything. His business, his home, and the woman who once loved him beyond measure. Now he was just another forgotten man. He had tried calling Amara again, but she never answered. She had made it clear, there was no place for him in her life. And the truth was, he didn't deserve one. One evening, Samuel ran into an old business associate, Mr. Okafor. The older man was shocked at his appearance. "Samuel, what happened to you?" Samuel gave a bitter laugh. "Karma." Mr. Okafor sighed. "I warned you, didn't I? A good woman is worth more than gold. But you threw yours away." Samuel looked down. He didn't need the reminder. "I just need another chance," he whispered. Mr. Okafor shook his head. "Not all mistakes can be undone." With that, he walked away, leaving Samuel standing alone, the weight of regret heavier than ever. Across town, Amara sat with her children in their cozy home, helping them with their homework. Her life had become full, beautiful, and peaceful. She had no time for pain, no time for regret. Her story was no longer about heartbreak, it was about strength, resilience, and moving forward. And as she tucked her children into bed that night, she whispered to herself, "I made it." Samuel stood outside Amara's house, staring at the warm glow of the lights inside. Through the window, he could see her laughing with the kids, their faces full of joy. It was a home filled with love, something he had taken for granted, something he had lost forever. With a heavy heart, he knocked on the door. A moment later, Amara opened it, her expression unreadable. She had expected this moment. "Amara," he started, his voice shaking. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything." She studied him for a moment, then nodded. "I forgave you a long time ago, Samuel." Hope flickered in his eyes. "Does that mean?" She shook her head. "No. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. And it doesn't mean I'll let you back into my life." His heart sank. "I was a fool," he admitted. "I lost the best thing that ever happened to me." Amara gave him a small, sad smile. "Yes, you did." Silence stretched between them. For the first time, Samuel truly understood. There was no going back. Amara had moved on. And now he had to live with the consequences. Without another word, she closed the door. As she walked back inside, she felt nothing but peace. Samuel was her past. Her future was hers alone to shape. And she had never felt stronger. Thank you for watching the full story. What did you learn this story? Share your thought in the comment section.